what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and it's time for a review of the sophomore album from Steve Angello, Human. Steve Angello is a Swedish DJ and producer, best known for being 1/3 of the supergroup Swedish House Mafia, a group that was behind numerous hits in the early 2010s, including one featuring Pharrell Williams and Don't You Worry Child, although I shouldn't really have to tell you that. Both the group's first and second albums contributed heavily to my love of electro, tech, progressive, and big room house. Had it not been for those two albums, I'd say there's a pretty good chance I probably would have never started doing reviews on my channel. They were both very influential on my love for dance music. Outside my own headspace though, Swedish House Mafia definitely left behind a huge legacy in the electronic music world. Without their willingness to experiment with big room, there's no way acts like Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike or Martin Garrix would have been able to come to fame. You really can't deny that legacy, even if 2/3 of the group is off somewhere making electropop earworms. Steve Angello, on the other hand, is the one member of the group that I feel like has really held up his artistic integrity over these last 5 years that the Swedish House Mafia has been broken up. Not to say I haven't enjoyed my fair share of Axel and Ingrosso tunes, it's just that to me, Steve Angello has been the most consistently great artist out of the three. For one, Angelo beat Axel and Ingrosso to the punch when he put out his debut album Wild Youth in 2016, an album that, to say the least, was great. It was certainly one of my favorites that released that year. That album also featured the song Remember, which in my humble opinion is probably one of the most emotionally impactful house songs ever. Needless to say, when I found out Steve Angello was putting together a full-length sophomore album, I was pretty excited. So excited, in fact, that I, with all my power, avoided listening to every single song off this album pre-release. Even more so, though, I think the thing that got me really excited for this album was the Swedish House Mafia reunion that happened in March. Even if I couldn't actually be at Ultra Miami this year, I was able to watch the live stream, and it was absolutely incredible to see the three members back on stage together and with as much chemistry as ever before. Sure, they played out a lot of classics, but they also played a few new, really fresh songs, which I presumed were going to be on Human. I don't think any of them were, but I was still really excited for this album, okay? With my expectations being set so high, I guess it's only natural that I was a little bit let down by this album, but I wouldn't really say it's for the same reasons that a lot of albums end up letting me down. In fact, my biggest issue with this album, earnestly, is its length. Unless you're going to make a conceptual 2-disc experience like Deadmau5's While One Is Less Than Two, for example, I don't really think anything justifies putting out a 90-minute long EDM record. I mean, as someone that reviews albums and not songs, I'd like to think that I have an attention span that's longer than most, but even I had a really hard time sitting through this album. While I think the production work from track to track overall is pretty fantastic, I don't think Steve throws enough curveballs to really keep my attention locked. The majority of the album focuses around a central electro house sound, which has a very 80s and 90s kind of aesthetic to it. Definitely takes a lot of influence from Daft Punk and Justice, though I can definitely also hear some other influences like Deadmau5 on tracks like Lord, Eric Prydz on songs like Flashing Lights, maybe even a little Rez on Freedom. While I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with someone taking influence from a number of different places, I just think Steve Angello spends more time on this album kind of aiming for a nostalgia trip for the people who remember Daft Punk and Justice than he does actually presenting fresh and innovative ideas. And that's not to say that there aren't some really cool and unique moments on this album, because there are. In fact, there are plenty. It's just that they stick out like a sore thumb because this album is so dang long. And so many of the tracks are just so electro house songs. It would have been much less noticeable if the album had been a bit shorter. On top of that, in a number of places on this album, Steve seemed to have some really fresh ideas, but they kind of just fell a little bit flat. For example, there's the song Glory, which in my opinion uses its synths and its tempo changes in a really excellent way, but then it suffers from having the most generic chord progression. There's the song 21, which gives listeners a bit of a break from all the previous electro with a snare drum solo, but the solo really isn't that exciting. It probably would have been a little bit better if it was a full drum line instead of just one drum with a bunch of reverb on it. There's the song Heroes, which sounds like it could have been right off the second Glitch Mob album. There's Shifter, which sounds like a more stripped down version of Power Glove by Knife Party. I Know has a really juicy instrumental, but in my opinion that's kind of ruined by a really annoyingly repetitive vocal. But let me finish. I do genuinely think this album has more good to great moments than it does bad or mediocre. The song Rejoice is absolutely phenomenal, debatably my favorite song on the album. It features snippets of a sermon from megachurch pastor T.D. Jakes, who talks about renewing one's own mind, which starts off the album's more spiritual side in a really significant and impactful way. On a side note, I should mention that I love how Steve Angello's spirituality is such an important part of this album's overarching story. Even if not all the tracks are as in-your-face about it as Rejoice is, it's still really cool to see track names like Glory, Grace, Lord, and God. I think the song Breaking Kind is an absolutely fantastic work of electro synth pop, and Paul Meany's vocals work very nicely over that instrumental. I really like the melodic angle Angelo takes on Grace. I think the song Freedom is a banger, even if it doesn't feature my absolute all-time favorite performance from Pusha T. I really enjoy the vocals from Barnes Courtney on Dopamine. I like the song Break Me Down all the way around, and the song Nothing Scares Me Anymore with Sam Martin I think did an excellent job closing off the album, wrapping up all its themes, especially in its lyrics. So yeah, in my subjective headspace, I do think Human is a good album. Even if it is a little bit dull at times, and it does overstay its welcome a little bit, I think Human does have enough shining moments to make it stand out above a lot of the other EDM albums I've heard this year. Even if I don't prefer this project to Wild Youth, I would definitely suggest it to anyone looking for a solid collection of electro house tunes that has a very long attention span. For Steve Angello's Human, I am feeling a light 6.5 out of 10. If you guys haven't checked out this album already, I have the Spotify link down in the description below. And if you guys have listened to this album, which it's been out for a little while, so I'm guessing most of you that are watching this already have, let me know what you think down in the comment section below. As always, I'm Landon Remixes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Peace.